Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to be looking at one of my films that are more geared toward the 13 and up crowd, rather than the little kids. So, no, not even a little bit. As much as I love this film, middle schoolers maybe, but don't show the little kids one; they'll have no interest. So we're going to be looking at Chocolat. So again, this is January. I was looking at food films. There's not a lot to pick from. This is one of my favorites. So, despite the fact that it is PG-13. So this is an interesting film. Yes, it has Johnny Depp in it. He has an interesting role. He's not the main character. This film has a couple of different stories going on. The general story is you have this little French village that's very Catholic, very kind of repressed and stuck in the old ways. And into this village comes our main character, who is, I'll bring up the name here. Okay, there we go. Vivienne. And her daughter, whose name is Anouk. So they open up basically a chocolate treat, which is essentially, it's a chocolate store, primarily focused. Normally it's kind of specifically on gourmet chocolates. In this town, at the start of Lent. If you're not familiar with what Lent is, again, Catholic, it's I think they're 40 days of fasting before Easter. So you have Fat Tuesday, which is, or pancake day is what they call it, which happens right before that, and Carnival, which happens right before, and then you have Lent. So she shows up with basically starting up a chocolate tree during Lent, where they're not supposed to be having sweets, and they're supposed to not be indulging, and they're supposed to be fasting. And so she's kind of stirring things up. And she gets to know a couple different characters. So the first one is the Comte de Renard. Now, his backstory is kind of interesting. You don't really get much, but it's assumed that his wife left him. And he's crunching down on everything must be perfect. He's constantly fasting. He thinks he did something wrong because his wife abandoned him. You don't know how or why. It's assumed she ran off with other men, so that she's gone. And he refuses to admit it. So he's very much the nemesis to an extent in this film. He's holding on to the old ways. He has an interesting relationship with the young priest in the town. He's constantly writing his sermons for this guy and is very much the leader of the town, and they listen to him. And then the next character you interact with is Caroline Claremont. So she is she's a widow, and she has a young son by the name of Luke, and she's very much protective of him. And she likes the Commandant. And he kind of really likes her. But again, he's trying to hold close to his vows, despite the fact that his wife is long gone. And then you have the next interesting character, which is Caroline Claremont's mother, Armande Voisin, who is played by Dame Judi Dench. And she's older. She doesn't have a great relationship with her daughter because her daughter wants her to go away to basically an old folks home. And basically, mother does whatever she wants. And so Caroline is essentially preventing her own mother from seeing her son, who in one of the first scenes, he's interested in drawing things that are very, very dark. And he has that in common with his grandmother for kind of violent poetry. He likes to draw skulls and gory things. is very, very interested, and it drives his mother crazy. So the next character you interact with is, let's see, where is she? She's another young woman from the town. These are the major characters, is Josephine. And her husband owns a cafe. He's drunk. He's a dick. He's an alcoholic. He's abusing her. At one point in time, she basically, she steals because, again, she's abused and neglected and very much treated horribly by her husband, whose name is Sarge. So at one point in the time in the film, she runs away from her husband, having befriended Vivienne, and Vivienne takes her in and is going to help her build her confidence. Meanwhile, eventually, the commandant shows up. He's pissed off because this woman who's married has left her husband and is like, she's betraying her vows. She's like, what about him, not beating his wife and being an alcoholic? So he tries to reform Sarge. Now, the commandant also doesn't particularly like Vivienne because she's doing a couple of other things. There's a woman who comes in, and Vivienne ends up selling her some interesting chocolates, and then her husband gets a hold of them, and, well, it's going into chocolate aphrodisiac thing. So all of a sudden, there's an interesting scene where she's scrubbing their bathroom floor, and he sees her. He's eating a bunch of these chocolates, and he's looking at his wife's backside, and it's very kind of suggestive. Next thing you know, they're closing the window in their little house. And then there's also an older couple. There's an older man who I believe, honestly, John Wood. I think this is pulling up the actor here. He is who I think he is. Is he I've seen him in quite a few things. He's English. So, but let's see. No. But he and, that's where I see him from. He's in another film will come out later. The Sabrina, which is the modern rendition of it. But nonetheless, his character, who I cannot pronounce because it's very, very French, and another older woman, essentially, she's been widowed. He's a widower. She's a widower. And they like each other. And Vivienne kind of pushes them to enjoy life. Like, get together. You're both widowers. It doesn't matter that you're old. You can still have sex, essentially. So she's bringing out the love and essentially the fact that people she's encouraging them to live and not be so restricted. So that's the other thing. She can, as part of this, she's able to reunite the grandmother and her grandson. Grandmother gives him an interesting poetry book. So she's reuniting these people in their love of different things. And then later on, we have the gypsies show up that's where Johnny Depp comes in. So Johnny Depp is their river gypsies. And they show up in town because that's what they do. They're gypsies. And they throw a party basically a birthday party for Armand, the woman who's Vivienne's landlord. And basically a whole bunch of indulgence and fun, and it's certainly not the climax of the film, but actually kind of is, because they tried to boycott the gypsies because that's what they do. Again, this is France. Most of Europe doesn't deal with the gypsies. They're also called the Roma. And eventually Vivienne starts having kind of an affair with him. And it's kind of interesting, but they throw this big party, and the Muscat, the man who owns the cafe whose wife has left him, and he's being tried to be reformed, decides to set fire to things because he thinks that's what the commandant would want him to do. because the Commandant obviously wants these people to go away. He doesn't like Vivienne. He wants her to go away. But when he confesses to the Commandant, he's like, what? No, 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 no. I don't want you to kill people. Because he set fire to boats where there were people. It's like, no, now you leave town. So that's the other kind of interesting thing. And I think eventually, whether shortly before or after that, Armand dies. Eventually, she has diabetes. She's old. She's doing whatever what she wants because she wants to live. And then she dies. And then you have a little bit got to Brent. So this is kind of the backstory of Vivienne. You find out she tells the story to her daughter. How her father had been a French pharmacist, essentially. And he went to the pharmaceutical academy, put together this expedition to Central America to look at the medicinal properties of cacao, also known as chocolate. And he has a drink of it, which is a traditional medicinal drink used almost to put people into trance, which is usually a mixture of unrefined cocoa and chili and water, which probably tasted really, really disgusting because cocoa powder and water. That's what he was drinking. But again, and then he has an affair with a woman by the name of Chichen Itza. And the elders tell him, she's part of a tribe that is wanderers. She'll always be wandering. She's not really a good place for a wife. That's when you get the only real sex scene in the entire film. This is earlier on. You don't really see anything more than them kind of moving around in her bareback. But he marries her. They have a child, which is Vivienne. And it seems like their life is going to be okay. But the north wind comes and she takes their child and disappears. And essentially you realize, and that's kind of the story. And they travel for eternity. And at the end you get back to Vivienne telling the story to her daughter, and she says goodnight to her mother, which is in an urn. So now, after Armand's death, and what is Johnny Depp's character's name in here? He's not huge on this character, and he's still pretty early. And let's see if I can find him. He kind of has top billing on this, but he's not. Sometimes he's have a tendency to fight it. Let me see. Where on earth is his character? For some reason, I cannot see it. Rue is the name of the character. So he also leaves because it's like his home's been burnt down and he has to go kind of put things together. So the north wind blows and Vivienne and her daughter are going to leave, and Anouk does not want to. Anouk is fighting her mother, and Josephine realizes they're going to leave. And basically Easter is coming, so they're planning this huge kind of festival. And she gets Caroline to come in with her son and start making chocolate. And they see Anouk and her mother fighting, and her mother's and Vivienne's mother's urn crashes and breaks. And basically they convince her to kind of stay, at least for a little while. And she cleans everything up. After her and her daughter had this huge kind of confrontation. Daughter's maybe about 8 or 9, maybe 10 in this. So that's kind of the age of Anouk and her. She has an imaginary kangaroo by the name of Pantouf. They're kind of characters in this. So they have this, and however, and we go back to the whole Moustat setting things on fire and him revealing himself to the Commandant. And the Commandant says, get out of town. And then the Commandant doesn't know quite what to do. He tried to clean up this guy and he caused problems. This woman is changing his town. He's starving because he's constantly fasting and not eating absolutely anything, which is not what you're supposed to do at Lent. You're supposed to restrict yourself, not starve yourself, which is what he was doing. So he's walking through town and he sees Vivienne's window. So this is after she's decided to stay. He breaks in. and essentially destroys her decorated window of all the chocolates. And the young priest comes by early in the morning, it's Easter morning, and sees him and knocks on the door, wakes Vivienne. She gives him, I think it's probably soda water or something, because he's completely made a mess of this. Now, from the IMDb page, this is the actor's last scene, and they did this specifically because they thought he would make him sick because he's eating all this chocolate. And it's like, yes, he did. So this is actually the last scene shot in the film. So he gets out of the window. He hasn't completed the sermon. That's actually one of my favorite parts of the film. The young priest has to give his own sermon. So he comes up in front of his church and says, like, I don't know quite what I want my homily, which I'm assuming is what it means to be his ministry that day, to be. It's like, I don't want to talk about God's divinity. I would rather talk about his humanity, the way he was on earth. And he's like, this is what I think. I think we can't judge ourselves by what we deny ourselves, and basically who we exclude, and that we should judge ourselves by what we embrace, what we create, and who we include. And that's kind of the end of it. And then it's like a breath of fresh air has come through the town. And then you had this whole little kind of Easter festival, and the people playing and music, and you see the old couple who've been denying each other hanging out. You see Carolyn and the commandant doing googly eyes at each other, and you have the you have an adult Anouk who's narrating this. It's like, it would still take 6 months for him to bother to ask her out, but you kind of see the town is now happy and embracing and laughing. And then it kind of goes back, and the north wind blows, and Vivienne goes to the window, and it's like telling them of tales of people who still need help, and she takes her mother ashes and tosses, essentially, throws them to the wind. It's like for someone else, implying that they're going to stay. She's done traveling around. And then Rue shows up the next morning, and very much implied that they're going to be a family and stay. And that's the end of this film. That's one of the reasons I enjoy it. Yes, there's a Catholic element, but it's French. It's a little village in France. And in real life, the village they shoot in, there is no river next to it. And the shots with Judi Dench are in England, because her husband, I think, was ill at the time, so she didn't want to be far from home. And she's one of my favorite actresses, so very British. Very fun, very, very fun character. One of those old ladies that's like, yeah, I want to be here when I grow up, kind of thing, where she does not care at all. But it's a fun film that really has the message of, you have to embrace things and be happy and enjoy things and indulge a little, and you can't be so restricted, and be open, which is one of the reasons I love kind of those final lines of the young priest. It's like, we need to include people, create things, be happy. Which is one of the reasons, again, I love this film. And there's a lot of mixing of chocolate and chilies and various other things, and, embracing your sexual side just a little, which again is why this is older. So this is a fun film to watch with your teenagers, I would think. Particularly a mother. I think this is very much a mother-daughter kind of film. You say that way. Or, I don't know if a mother-son, depends on your son. But it's very much one of those films you would watch as an indulgent. There's not really much educational purpose to it, except for it's talking about, yes, originally cacao, chocolate, was drunk with chili and water. And occasionally, I think there's a Mexican dish where they do masa with it. So that is a thing. But again, you also see a little bit of a French town, but otherwise, it's just kind of fun. It's inspiring. It's definitely an Easter film, because again, that's what time this is happening. and just kind of the idea of embracing light and renewal. Again, it ends on Easter, which is thankfully the Easter. It's like things are awakening, things are renewing. The darkness is gone because winter is over. And this mother-daughter relationship where the daughter desperately wants to stay. And you get that in the very beginning. It's like, how long can we stay? She's sick of being dragged around, and her mother finally sets down roots. Oh, the other ending part is Josephine's husband's gone. Commandant kicks him out of town, and she takes over and has the cafe, and it's a much happier, less dark, drinky place. So the people are happy, and they're embracing things, and they're creating things. And that's really the message of this film, and one of the reasons I love it. And I love the creativity, kind of the mysticism, a little bit of it, of the traveling, and they're coming to rescue the town, but then they end up staying. So, and I'm not a huge Johnny Depp fan. This is one of 2 films. Actually, it's 3. For some reason, I ended up covering 3. Possibly because I'm doing an adaptation of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That's coming in a couple of months. So I actually haven't filmed the Johnny Depp version yet. I'm waiting for I have a copy of the film on hold at the library. It hasn't come in yet. So I did the Willy Wonka already. But again, I'm not the hugest Johnny Depp fan, yet somehow I end up covering 3. The other film that I am covering is The Man Who Cried. Is more, again, that's a couple months down the road. It's Jewish kind of centered, which I believe is when it's coming out. I have it scheduled for May. But he's still a good actor. He's not a major part of this film. It's very much focusing on the character of Vivienne, which again is played by my cat just jumped out of my lap. Calicos are irritating. I'm going to go back to the beginning here. Juliette Binoche, who's Vivienne. And then if you're Matrix fans, no, your eyes are not deceiving you. Yeah, the character of the actress who played Trinity is in this film. And this was, I believe, I don't know whether it was before or after. This film came out in 2000. So this is before The Matrix, I believe. No, I'm not covering that film. It serves very little purpose. So, but she is very, again, you have a variety of different arcs of this tiny little town. So that's it for this review. If you like what you see, be sure to check out the rest of my channel. This is on the higher age range of what I cover film-wise. Mostly I cover kids stuff. Thus, you know, the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which, yes, I will get to again. It hasn't been filmed yet because I'm waiting on it, but I have the book. There's a couple of Roald Dolls things. Normally, I cover children's books. Mostly, it's picture books, and I do more family-friendly films. The Man Who Cried is not. It's Jewish focused, but it has historical context. That's the second film where Johnny Depp plays a gypsy. This is the lighter version, where he survives in that film. It's implied he dies, but again, World War II. Different film. Again, like and subscribe. Be sure to check out my channel. Besides the films and mostly the younger children's book reviews and the far more kid-friendly, family-friendly film reviews, I do a sprinkling of educational, homeschooling specifically, videos. My channel is very homeschooling focused. Non-religious homeschoolers, we are secular, but I have a 2-year-old, so we're not doing a lot of schooling right now because, again, 2-year-old. So, but still, again, like and subscribe. Check out what I've got. I have a lot more planned, particularly in the way of book reviews and film reviews. So thank you.